Hey YouTube, we are jumping into the third segment of our conversation with Derek, and this is a great segment to listen to hear about the focus and clarity that the leader organization is after as they move into, getting very close to launching their company. And it just kind of helps to hear the perspective of somebody in Derek's position, but also just as the company approaches this milestone to hear their approach, what they've gone through, and what they've got looking forward. Because it's with a solution based product like theirs, you really, the sky's the limit on things that you can add in so anyway, we get into opinionated product development and some things that Derek introduces that I think are really just fundamental for startups and business growth and I'm really looking forward for you to see this. So connect with me, leave a comment, like and share. Be sure to subscribe. I'm counting on my early watchers and listeners to really, give me feedback and engage in this community. I truly want it to be a community, and I want it to impact you all, and I want it to be something that is of value to you to share with somebody else and kind of help connect me to a broader audience. So appreciate your time. I hope you enjoy the discussion, and let me know if there's any thoughts that come out of this, and whether it's through comments or direct messaging or something like that. Hope you're having a good day. Enjoy.
Right.
Yeah. And have you heard about this idea of like opinionated kind of product development, or kind of an opinionated approach to developing something?
When you have a bias toward it being your idea kind of thing. Is that where you're going with that?
A little different. So the risk becomes like, if all I do is just ask customers what they want,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to build what they want. And it's going to end up with a lot of features, kind of a blank slate. It's going to be highly customizable. And then I'm believing that because they wanted it, it must be for their good. And so they're going to use it and get the most out of it, and it's going to be effective. And sure, that can work. You can tell where I'm going with this, though. I believe in a little bit more of an opinionated approach to say, what do we believe based off of our research, our experience, our trial and error? What do we believe are the habits and practices that lead to effective people development? Okay, now if you do these three things, you will see improvement. Is there customization within that? Absolutely, like little pieces to it.
Mm-hmm.
But different things, no. Like different things, no. And you have to, I believe, for effective product development, you have to be able to say no and consistently say no and have a reason behind why you're saying no.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so I would say, like, man, what we're doing with Team Pulse is kind of like raising this to the surface right now, even internally. Like, do we allow organizations to create their own categories, to create their own questions? To turn on like anonymous versus non-anonymous responses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you might you
Yeah.
look like a compassionate guy, so you might say that's the right thing to do. Like, we should give them options. Like, they should be able to do that. It's their organization. But then when you say, well, what are we measuring, and how do we make sure we're measuring the right things, and how do we make sure that data is surfaced in a way that gives them the insights that they need, rather than using it to abuse employee trust, to punish or to terminate folks that just don't get along with the mission, or even like for employees to just gripe and complain without any action ever being taken off the back of this.
Yeah.
So you see, a bad feedback system
Yeah.
creates bad results, all because we wanted to give the customer what they said they wanted.
Right. Yeah. That's an interesting challenge with designing this and trying to make sure that you are answering, filling a gap, but also maintaining the integrity of
Yep.
the system behind it. That's interesting.
You can tell I get passionate about that.
Let me ask you,
Like,
are y'all considering, or maybe it's already incorporated, any kind of peer-to-peer grading, feedback, anything like that?
it's being considered. Right now, though, like if you were on the beta right now, and really what you'll probably see when it launches is there is the ability to request feedback from others within the organization. There are different feedback frameworks that we have that are in the system that you can choose, but you can also just ask kind of however you or your organization wants feedback. And then this would be kind of open text fields feedback that is non-anonymous, right? So the way that we've used this internally pretty successfully. So I did a presentation after I first started, which was, hey, best practices of marketing. And it was for the whole team.
Mm-hmm.
And then afterwards you could send out, hey, what were your big impressions from the talk I gave? And the types of responses you get back are actually pretty enlightening, right? Because now we're speaking to their perception of it and what were their takeaways. Because I, as the presenter, believed I had given them certain takeaways, but then what did they actually walk away with?
Yeah.
And so some of what I heard in that first talk like really hurt my feelings, because I was like, you guys are only supposed to say good things. Like feedback should only be good. Like, don't tell me anything I don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Just build each other up. But like one of them was like, hey, sometimes you trying to make jokes or whatever, it undermines your credibility. So it's like, oh, like that's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like that, but that's a really good point because, I'm a VP of marketing. I guess I should be credible, right? I should be painting the picture across the organization of like, hey, we can trust marketing. They've got a strategy. They know what they're doing. They stand firm on these principles. But sometimes when you have the wrong types of jokes in the wrong moments, it undermines that. And it's like, well, is he even taking this seriously?
Right. Yeah, it could be insecurity, it could be comedy, it could be humility, depending on, yeah.
So there's an example. So I would say like that practice will be in the tool, but really if it's like go 1-to-1 another employee unsolicited, rate them 1 to 5 on how humble they are or something. Like
Right.
I don't know if or when that would ever be in the tool, because I'd have to we would have to see like what purpose does it serve towards real people development.
Right. And I will say from my experience, I have not lived through anything like that. I've heard of it at a different facility with the company I was with. And I don't know exactly how it was carried out, so I can't give too much from an experience standpoint. But it just came to mind, kind of circling back, connecting the dot with what we were talking about earlier, as far as a 6 from one person and a 10 from another, and really calibrating that as the manager or really anybody else looking at the results. I can see where, as long as it's not abused, right? There's a caveat there. I can see where some form of peer-to-peer could help. I don't know, kind of even the playing field or calibrate, so to speak.
And I think it's like they say that the most effective goals are self-imposed goals, right? Like for example, you said I'm training for my first Ironman triathlon.
Right.
Like nobody was like, you have to go do that. Right. And like, you got to do it by this date and you got to hit these milestones.
Right.
If not, you're fired.
Right.
Something. It's like, you've imposed this. It's important to you until you're driven by it.
Right.
And I would say feedback is similar, right? When you have a culture of feedback, or when you have a desire to learn, grow, be developed, and then I go solicit it from others, now I'm open, right? I'm open to hearing and things like that, versus if it's forced upon me, that's where to me it gets a little bit weird.
Right. Yep. I'll check my notes here a little bit, just make sure.
What's your strongest event in the triathlon? Are you a cyclist?
I've been a runner for about 11 years.
Okay, so running is the strength.
Committed to endurance running for about 11 years. I haven't done anything crazy as far as 50 or 100 mile or anything like that. I just really went through the first several years of my career just kind of maintaining, running because it was interesting to me. I didn't really have time for it. A lot of times I'd be running on Saturday morning and my wife would be like, can we just have a Saturday morning where, we're enjoying breakfast or coffee or, whatever.
Yeah.
But for a while I didn't train for a whole lot, and did my first half Ironman last year, and had already committed to do a full distance before I, finished that one. I just think, I'm interested in the challenge. I'm interested in to even be able to complete. You really have to commit to a healthy lifestyle, and I like that byproduct, so to speak. I definitely want to be able to, say that I've done it. Right, there's some pride there,
There you go.
but uh, discipline and consistency are something that I want to master, so to speak, or do the best that I can, and this is one way that interests me in kind of applying myself to those things and making them a more concrete part of who I am. And so we'll see. I mean, it'll be fun, but I think and this is totally off topic, I'll probably be somewhere in the 13, 14-hour range total. So it'll be a long day, but not trying to compete with the top, even in my age group. But I'm really looking forward to the experience, and I just think in general, endurance training, regardless of what sport or anything like that, I think there's a lot of takeaways. I think there's a lot of takeaways from a leadership standpoint, personal, professional growth, and yeah. So anyway, not sure how I got off on that.
That's good. I think there's probably an emotional thing too, like just crossing that finish line. Like
Right,
your wife's gonna be there.
right,
Maybe she'll be the one that puts like that warming blanket around you that
right,
they do to like get your body temp back up.
right.
You're like, look, like I did it.
Yep,
Now I can have breakfast with you on Saturdays.
right. Yeah, no, she made a comment the other day about how uh, I mentioned something about training time and looking out at something else that's later this year, and she more or less told me, don't plan on it. I want you back when you get done devoting half of your week to training. So, but it's been really a blessing of some sorts to have more free time, be pursuing this podcast, and just kind of get more ingrained in this world, but also spending somewhere in the neighborhood of 15 to 18 hours a week training, plus commute times to spend this stuff. But so one thing I did want to kind of, I guess, tell the story here is, you're in startup mode, haven't launched, you're in beta mode, you hope to launch or expect to launch in the next, sounds like maybe a couple months, which is awesome. Is that I just want to kind of get a feel for the momentum, the project management that's gone into that, and really what has that story been for the, or there's a lot of questions here, so I'm sorry
Yeah.
to bombard you with this, but I'm just thinking like, what were the expectations? What things have come up through either your internal testing or from your customers' standpoint, and you said, hey, that's really interesting, but now's not the time. You know what I'm saying? Like, what's that evolution been? Because you said, the company's 18 months in? Is that what I heard? Okay, so I mean that's a decent amount of time, but I'm sure it's also felt like it's flown by for everybody that's been in it.
I would answer that with, again, what I see as kind of a characteristic of high performing teams. We call it clarity, but the component here is focus. I would say more
Okay,
than anything else.
nice.
And really, when, let's just say you sit down at a table for the first time and you're like, how can we solve this problem? Like the list that you come up with is probably like huge, right? Like, well, in my experience, in my opinion, it should look like this. Like we should get people to do this, or we should build this feature in. And then it goes through a long process of validation, testing, building, refinement.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say that's been the journey that we've been on, more than figuring out new features or whatever, is just more refinement and focus on the most important habits to create. And really, when we look at the space that we're in, this is it's people management software, but it's under the broader category of HR software.
Mm-hmm.
And so if any of you have ever used an HR software, you know how many features are in there, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
it's built to do one thing well, typically, and that's compliance and documentation.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to actual performance development or people development, I mean, that's almost an afterthought. And so we knew we had to stay focused. And so there's been stuff that we had in mock-ups that just that got cut out.
Mm-hmm.
And as we've added more talent to the team, that brings new perspectives. And so even from a development standpoint, it's like, man, we have one thing, and then there's new talent that gets added in. It's like, actually, that part that you just made there with that's not going to scale. Like as soon as you start to get more and more users, that's actually going to break. And then
Mm-hmm.
this slows down deployment time, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to be able to have the velocity we need down the road. So now as a team, you're making decisions like, well, do we launch earlier and just get this thing out there? Or do we slow down and launch right, knowing that this is really helpful in the long term? And so thankfully we have, kind of the leadership here that's patience, to a certain extent, to be able to say, hey, let's make sure we do at least the foundation correctly. And so it's been kind of a blessing in disguise because it forced us to really just go back and reevaluate everything then. It's like, well, if we know we're now committing an extra 3 months to build this foundation correctly, what should we be doing then? Like what will be most effective? And so that has led to some different revelations and some different insights, the chance to do more user interviews and testing to actually change, right? Like it changed what we would have originally launched, and I think for the better. So it's stuff that customers are never really going to see, right? And it's not part of the story that's probably ever going to be told. But I think it's been really, really important and valuable for us. And I'd say this is a life principle. I used to have a thing hanging up in my office somewhere that was delay does not mean defeat, because we're so hardwired that like if there's any delay, if there's any period of waiting, that's just instant frustration, right? Like that should just never happen. But I think that we see this example throughout scripture, but also just in life of like, there's actually a reason for it. There's a reason for the pause. Even this thing for you in your life, right? Like I lost the job. I've been interviewing, so I've been putting in the work, but I just haven't been able to get it yet. It's caused a pause. So I'm going to reevaluate what is success. I'm going to go deep on training discipline that I've never had before, but I've always wanted, right? When you come out of this season, you are going to be a more disciplined person, right? You're going to have a depth to you. You're no longer going to be chasing a title to say successful. You're going to have different characteristics about you that you're going to say like, this is now successful. And it may just be in the home. Like it may be like, man, my role as a husband, as a dad, my accountability before God and stewarding like the talents that he has given me. That's how I define success now. And I'm just living out here. I'm not chasing out here. I'm just living and abiding out here. So that's my life. That's my life analogy for what's kind of going on internally at the company.
Yeah, no, I think it's relevant, and I think it's fascinating to hear different approaches, right? Because you kind of have to commit. You have to commit to being focused. You have to commit to the game plan, or you'll just find yourself that you're constantly spinning your wheels or constantly considering new ideas. So I'm excited for y'all.
Thank you.
I want to hear more about how, I guess, what excites y'all at this stage. Obviously, there's probably a lot of innate anxiety and excitement built up, this close to officially launching. But just answer that, real quick. What would you, or maybe it's a personal thing, and maybe it's not necessarily directed towards LEADR. What are you excited about?
I think about so early in becoming a parent. So when I married my wife, she had two sons already from a previous relationship, and so 10 and 4, and we got married. And so really early on in our marriage, I was a dad. without having maybe the luxury of like the baby toddler phase to like your training wheels or whatever. It was kind of like, oh, okay, like there's an older child in the home already. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time doing was sports. And both these boys didn't really know how to shoot a basketball correctly when we first got together. And I was like, okay, we're going to work on that. And both of them now have a love for the game of basketball. Both of them still play. They had never really thought soccer was a real sport. And I was like, let's get out there. Like, let's just try out this soccer thing. I began to coach the 10-year-olds team. And this first season that we were coaching, it's kind of a ragtag group of kids. There was like the one superstar kid, and then the rest of them were kind of just like all over the place. Different confidence levels, different skill levels. Some of them had never played before. Some of them had. Some of them were in great shape. Some of them were overweight. Some of them were like really obedient, disciplined kids. Other ones kind of had some behavioral challenges and things like this.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a coach, it's like your job in a very short period of time to figure out not only how to motivate each individual person, but what are their strengths? Like, because I can only do so much in this period of time. I can't make them into superstar soccer players. But if I take what they're already naturally strong or gifted in and enhance that a little bit, and then plug it into exactly the right place on the field with the right instruction, we're going to have a lot of success here. And so I think about that experience, and there were two boys in particular. Actually, there was 3 boys that were really great. And I'll just tell it really quick because it's like it's. And so one of them was like, he was overweight, right? And so he didn't do a lot of sports. His parents had put him into soccer of like, man, is there a way to kind of get some conditioning in him? We want to get him exercising. He just doesn't take an interest in a lot of sport activities. And so he was never going to be the player who was sprinting down the field and outrunning everybody. If I would have put him in that position, he wouldn't have done well. But there was one practice in particular where I was like, I'm going to show you guys how to do kind of a standing tackle. And in soccer, it's essentially like you're going to have your weight over your knees. Players coming at you, doesn't matter how good they are, doesn't matter how fast they are. If you stand in front of them, give your foot a little bit of a sideways motion and stand still, that ball's going to stop. That player's not going to stop. They're going to go flying past you. And we just did this really fun little standing tackle drill where it's like all the kids got to, take on each other. It's like, whoa, that actually works. This one player, he picked up that principle unlike anybody else. I put him as an outside back defender, so doesn't have to have great speed or anything like that at this age. He all of a sudden had confidence that anyone that was running at him, he could just stand right in front of them. He was bigger than them, and they would just fall over.
Yeah.
He became one of my best defenders. It's like I wanted him on the field. He loved it, right? Like because he was like, oh, I'm good at this, and now he's like having a lot of fun, not even realizing he's exercising.
Yeah.
Oh, my dog's barking. Sorry about that. The other one was one that's like a very challenging kind of a behavior kid, where he wanted to like kind of rebel against authority. He wanted to do his own way. He wanted to kind of go off to the side. He wanted to say no. And so I realized, okay, he's got great, I called it leadership potential back then. I wouldn't necessarily use that word today, but like he just had like the makings of a person that other people wanted to follow because he was so extreme. And so I was like, I gave him ownership over something on this field. And I was like, you know what? If I made him kind of my sweeper or my defensive stopper, where he now gets to say to the goalie and to the 4 across the back line, this is what we're going to do. Yeah. We need to step up. He loved it. Like he loved it. And he came up to me after one game, like in front of his mom, a single mom household. And he was like, thank you so much, coach. I'll do whatever you ask, whatever you need me to do, I will do it.
That's awesome.
I was like, oh my goodness. Like it just makes you want to start crying.
All right.
And the last one I'll tell you. Okay, hopefully this is all relevant and interesting.
Yeah.
The last one was the smallest kid on the field, just really, really small. And again, like in a typical like, oh, what makes a great soccer player at that age? You're not really looking for that. right? You're looking for like speed and size, agility, ball control, things like that. And so it was like, where do I put him on the field that will hide him? That would be the typical coach mindset. How do I hide this player? Because it's a weakness. But I was like, man, what is he good at? And I was like, look at his ball control in tight spaces. Like for some reason, he's just able to keep this ball at his feet where other people have a heavy touch. And look at his decision making once he has the ball. He's able to play that right. It's maybe not the longest pass across the field, but it's even just a small touch to the right or to the left. He knows how to get the ball to the right place. I made him my my offensive center midfielder, which is a key position on the field. But I was like, look, he can get the ball in tight spaces, hold on to it, and make the right decision to activate the offense. And I was like, this is incredible. And so again, he was a player that's like, I want him on the field in that position. And so I got to close the loop on that story because that seemed like a tangent maybe, but it's like, man, when I think about like what we're passionate about, it's like that in the workplace. I'm not trying to make everybody exactly the same. I'm not trying to replicate or duplicate. It's just like, where are people naturally gravitating to? Where are their strengths? And I get excited. You could tell from that story probably. I get excited when I see people using their strengths. I think this is a universal like human characteristic. Like we get excited when people are using their strengths. It's why we pay really big money to go to concerts or to see like professional athletes, to go to Ironmans, right? Like we see people who are like, look at them excel. That's exciting for some reason. And so imagine like you're a manager of a team. I can look around and be like, look at each of them excelling, not one of them the same, all working towards the same purpose. I don't know, like that would make work worthwhile to me. And so if we can do that, even for a handful of companies, I think we'll do it for a lot more than a handful. But if we can do that, like the potential here is kind of unlimited.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great way to relate it and frame it. I fully, I mean, I think you could tell I have completely buy into the way y'all are approaching it, and I think there's a tremendous market for it. I think that it's obviously a tool, and it'll be up to the end user to maximize the use and to keep the integrity of the system and be effective with it.
Yeah.
But I think it's important that y'all have built in flexibility, and maybe this is a good spot to speak a little bit about like the content. So you have ratings, you have one-on-ones. Let's say you have assessment, feedback, learning, development, and measurement. Is that right? Coaching and measurement. So that's the process, right? Or that's the framework. So part of that learning, right, is individualized access to content, and that content does not have to be produced, or probably isn't mostly produced within the company. Can you kind of elaborate on that?
This is like one of my favorite pages in the book. No one's gonna. I don't do. Are we doing? Is this gonna be a video thing or is it only an audio thing?
Both, yeah.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad I dressed up then. Dress up for me is like put a suit jacket over a hoodie. But this is like my favorite page in the book, right? And this really like came out in the early user interviews, which is just this idea of like no one's really after more content. Like no one's like, man, if only I have more content in my life, right? Then I would. It's like, no, like this is why the traditional university model is struggling, is because there's just so many different ways to learn now or access content, etc. And so this is why too that like learning management systems and some of these different training softwares that are out there, which are very popular and in a certain sense needed. That's why the adoption of those systems within a company is really difficult. Like I can make access available, but it doesn't mean people are going to use it or get value out of it. And so it's like unlimited content is now available at the push of a button in any format, yet content does not equal learning, right? And so when we think about content within the platform, we're not trying to be the next consultants, the next coaches. We're not trying to write a bunch of curriculum. There's so many great resources that are out there, and we've cultivated some of those or curated those to put them in software. But really, it's just a place for you to put hyper-targeted relevant content to a specific individual, assign it to them, and then add that assignment back into the next one-on-one, right? And so the way that this kind of gets used internally is we'll have a team meeting. It could be about opinionated product development, okay? A product manager goes and he's just like this content nerd. He'll go read like every single blog, every single tweet of all these famous people. And so that's one of the strengths he brings to the team is like, he's out there pulling all kinds of stuff. But when he just like fills up a Slack channel with everything he's ever read in his life, people are just like tune out, like snooze, like,
Right.
okay, we get it. But if off the back of that meeting, we just had this conversation, a point gets raised that there was a little bit of disagreement on, he sends it individually to me to say, hey, this is what I was talking to. Check out paragraph 3. That's really the point I was making. How do you think this applies to what we're doing here? I actually can fill in like, okay, I read that. Here's what I think about it. Add to next meeting. We have a product marketing sync.
Mm.
Add to next meeting. Let's discuss. Now all of a sudden that's like really actionable and practical. It's less about like the huge library of content, and it's more about like putting it into that that really like customized space.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great way. We talked earlier about wanting to adapt to the customer's culture or desires, needs, whatever it may be. This seems like a good place for them to kind of make it their own
Yep.
identity, so to speak. And I think it's cool that the setup is, hey, here's the framework, here's the expectation. Use what's relevant for you. I'm not trying to be the next Tony Robbins or put,
Exactly.
replicate a bunch of content that's already out there. That would be a lot of wasted time. Let's filter that down to what is going to work for us. I like that.
Yeah, because a lot of orgs, they have like, here's our onboarding documentation, or this is just how we operate. This is our cultural handbook. So we're not trying to replace that. It's just, can we give it a vehicle that now can upload and be assigned and then lead back into that personalized coaching, one-on-one conversation with the manager, because we think that's kind of the secret sauce to learning.
Okay, so how was that? Pretty good, right? So that was, us more or less wrapping up the bulk of the conversation. But the cool part is we planned about an hour conversation, and we ended up talking about 2 hours, right at 2 hours. And so I've really had to work to parse this into, really meaningful episodes and carving out, different topics. But the cool part is there will be a 4th episode in this series, and in that it will look a little bit different because more or less Derek and I jumped into some get to know you conversation right at the beginning before we even started the planned conversation, and then at the end he really has some good like call to action words for the audience, and just really excited to kind of mash that up and bring that to you next week. So be looking forward to that. Thank you for watching this video. Don't forget, be you, be confident, and be a catalyst.